Welcome to World True Crime, where we delve into the most captivating, mysterious, and chilling stories from around the globe. Each episode, we uncover the dark secrets, intricate plots, and untold truths behind real-life crimes that have shocked the world. Today, we dive into the case of Alix Tichelman, a young woman with a troubled past and a taste for the darker side of life. Found herself entangled in a web of high-stakes relationships, addiction, and ultimately, death. From her early years of promise to her descent into the world of drugs, BDSM, and sugar dating, Alix's story is a cautionary tale that culminates in the suspicious deaths of two men, each tied to her in ways that are as chilling as they are enigmatic. Was she a victim of circumstance or a cold-hearted predator? This is the story of Alix Tichelman, a life marked by seduction, scandal, and the search for justice. Canadian-born, Alix Tichelman spent her formative years in an affluent suburb of Georgia. She was adopted and raised by Bart and Leslie Tichelman. Leslie Ann worked part-time in retail, while Bart held an executive position as the vice president of the technology firm Synapsense. Bart was fascinated with poker, and his prowess as a Texas Hold'em player was solidified when he pocketed over $400,000 from the 2008 World Series of Poker circuit in Tunica. Throughout her high school years in Atlanta, Alix engaged in various sports and was a talented writer. However, her life took a turn when she was introduced to marijuana at 14 and heroin at 16. When the issue got out of hand, her parents turned to the Hyde boarding school in Maine, which positions itself as a school devoted to developing self-confidence and self-discipline. With an annual tuition of $52,000, this institution had a reputation for rehabilitating troubled young women. Despite her parents' high hopes, the intervention proved unsuccessful. Alix left the high school at the end of the 2003 academic year and graduated from a public high school 2 years later. According to her social media accounts, Alix then pursued a journalism degree at the University of Georgia, but dropped out after 2 semesters. Alix moved to San Francisco in 2010, continuing her struggles with heroin. In 2011, she started a YouTube channel under the name A.K. Kennedy, hoping to follow the success of the prominent beauty influencer Nikki Tutorials. This is the most difficult part, and I have to say that if you are not skilled in that with liquid liner, then I would just use pencil liner or use a flat brush for applying black eyeshadow. So if I could just learn, Alix's channel did not gain traction and she moved on to other pursuits. On social media, she described herself as a BDSM fetish model and aspired to carve out a career in that niche. In an article with Fix magazine, she opened up about her experiences within the BDSM lifestyle, describing herself as a submissive. She said she would sometimes allow her boyfriend to lead her on a leash and call her into clubs. She added, "I've always been attracted to the darker side. My parents said by the time I was 3, I was an intense child and already liked horror movies." In early 2011, she met and began to date the 52-year-old Dean Riopel. He was an entrepreneur and owner of a number of nightclubs. Alix moved into Riopel's luxury home in Milton, Georgia, in 2013. They were openly discussing marriage until Riopel unfortunately passed from a cardiac arrest later that year. By the end of 2013, Alix was grappling with a serious heroin addiction. She was able to keep her head above water with the occasional modeling shoot, but it was not enough to finance her lifestyle and feed her drug habit. So she turned to the world's oldest profession, specifically the internet phenomenon known as sugar dating, which claims to promote transactional relationships, usually between an older, wealthy person and a younger person. Alix set up a profile on the site seekingarrangement.com, which purports to connect sugar babies with sugar daddies or mamas, ensuring that both parties get what they desire. Describing a little bit about myself. She's 26, loves cooking, sunsets, a typical online dating profile until this section. Basically, the allowance you're seeking. I have moderate, which is $3,000 to $5,000 a month, and you heard right, an allowance to date her. Bella, that's not her real name, is paid by suitors who list their sizable income and net worth. So-called sugar daddies meeting sugar babies on the website seekingarrangement.com. I'm able to live the lifestyle I want without slaving for it. I'm being taken care of by someone I truly care for, and they're caring for me. The site's founder, Brandon Wade, is noted for claiming love is a concept invented by poor people. Wade appeared on the HLN Network's Dr. Drew show in 2014 to answer questions and defend his service. It's troublesome in the way they would use a site like this. But go ahead. If you could answer Sam's, how are you screening these women to make sure that they are mentally healthy and they aren't past trauma survivors? Well, first of all, it's impossible to screen anyone for that. I'm not a psychologist, and certainly a website cannot cannot do the job of a psychologist, is number one. Number two, I think there's a misconception of what seeking arrangement or any of these sugar daddy websites is. It's not a prostitution website. It's a website where women can find wealthy men who are going to spoil and pamper them. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with having a wealthy boyfriend? Well, buy you gifts, take you out while you pamper you. Every girl wants to meet and marry a rich husband. That's just the nature of our society, need to adhere to. You've got to get in there and see. Not a prostitution ring. It's for you. Yes, you don't want me to want a rich husband, right? I mean, I agree with Brandon. I don't think there's anything wrong with this website. I think it's about individual responsibility. At the peak of her activity on the sugar dating site, Alix claimed to have a clientele exceeding 200 wealthy individuals. These customers were willing to pay substantial sums for various encounters with her and quickly became her primary income source. One such client was a Google executive and married father of 5 named Forrest Hayes. Originally from Dearborn, Michigan, Forrest Hayes relocated with his wife and their 5 children to a $3 million home in Santa Cruz, California. There, he had a notable career working for Silicon Valley tech behemoths such as Apple, Google, and Sun Microsystems. When he was not working, he enjoyed spending time on his 50-foot yacht, which he named the Escape. Married for 17 years, Forrest was considered a loving father and doting husband. On the surface, he appeared to have every marker of success, wealth, status, family, and career. Yet beneath that shiny facade, there was an underlying restlessness, a nagging hunger that couldn't be satiated. That yearning led him to the Seeking Arrangement website, which is how he met Alix. Like a moth to a flame, Forrest was drawn to the tattooed, non-conforming vixen, perhaps his polar opposite. Forrest initially paid Alix between $2,000 to $3,000 to have dinner with him, for asking her to meet him on his boat. 1 week prior to his date with Alix, Forrest arranged a boat encounter with a separate woman, at which time they allegedly used methadone, causing him to pass out. Upon waking, he called the woman to say he was okay. That experience did not stop him from seeing Alix as planned. On his yacht, just a few days before Thanksgiving 2013. The agreement was that he would supply the alcohol, and she would bring the drug. When the day arrived, they uncorked the wine, engaged in conversation, and started to enjoy the evening. But as Forrest closed his eyes in anticipation of the needle entering his arm, little did he know, he would never see the light of day again. When Forrest's wife realized he hadn't come home, she contacted the boat's captain, who found Forrest's lifeless body on the yacht and called 911. Detectives noted a fresh injection mark and 2 used wine glasses, but found no drugs or needles. They were left wondering who had been on the boat with Forrest. While the Santa Cruz medical examiner identified heroin overdose as the cause of death, detectives were uncertain whether it was accidental or deliberate. Building their case, they encountered some clues, along with unexpected delays. On discovering Forrest's boat was newly equipped with surveillance cameras, they approached the captain and were informed the cameras were not working at the time. Turning to Forrest's phone for forensic analysis, they found he had an account on a sugar daddy dating site. The trail led to messages exchanged between him and Alix, revealing their plan to meet on the night of Forrest's death. This discovery made Alix Tichelman the primary person of interest, sparking an intense search to locate her. Meanwhile, despite the boat's captain assuring them the cameras were not working, Santa Cruz police did their due diligence and reached out to the technology company that set up the cameras. Detectives were surprised to learn the cameras were working the night of Forrest's death, and footage of that evening was available on a remote server. Took detectives 3 months and a court order to get a copy of the video. Incidentally, despite police stating the captain lied about the camera's functionality, which cost them several weeks of investigation, no charges were brought against the captain due to police discretion. Authorities reviewed a 7-minute video from the boat and were able to positively identify Alix. Detectives claimed the video shows her injecting heroin into herself and Forrest, who then suffered complications and went unconscious. Instead of aiding or calling 911, Alix was allegedly seen cleaning up, taking the drugs and needles, drawing the blinds, and fleeing. Meanwhile, as the investigation advanced, Alix made questionable posts on social media. One post, dated June 28, 2014, stated, "After several months of investigation, authorities believe they finally had sufficient probable cause to show Alix injected Google executive Forrest Hayes with a lethal dose of heroin and then watched him die. It's a nice power, but it wasn't very nice powerboat. People at the Santa Cruz harbor only knew the owner of the luxury yacht. The escape died on board from an overdose last November. But today, the real story emerged. We eventually uncovered the video that was available. Police say they watched surveillance video of 51-year-old Forrest Hayes, former senior director of Apple's worldwide operations, as he was injected with heroin supplied and administered by 26-year-old high-priced prostitute Alix Tichelman. Hayes was working on Google X at the time of his death. Police say Tichelman never tried to help him or call 911. But she was so callous that in gathering her things, she was literally stepping over the body, and at one point stepped over the body to grab a glass of wine and finish the glass of wine. Tichelman's fingerprints were discovered on the wine glass. After obtaining an arrest warrant, authorities struggled to find Alix, who had left the Santa Cruz area. Police eventually arranged a sting posing as a client online. When Alix agreed to meet at an upscale location, she was arrested on charges of second-degree murder, destruction of evidence, and transporting narcotics. She was held without bond at Santa Cruz County Jail. At the initial hearing 5 days later, prosecutors charged Alix with 8 counts, including manslaughter, prostitution, destroying evidence, and several charges related to administering and possessing heroin. No, I read it. Thank you very much for your appearance here today. The status is on video. Bail is not going to be set at this time. And it's my understanding that is in line with the counsel. At the arraignment on July 16, 2014, Alix was represented by attorney Larry Bigham. During the proceedings, Bigham questioned why Alix would kill Forrest when he had been paying her so well. Rather, attorney Bigham said, Alix pleaded not guilty to all charges, and bail was set at $1.5 million pending trial. What I would like to be as compelling is involuntary manslaughter. At a plea hearing on May 19, 2015, Alix avoided going to trial by pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter, prostitution, and possession of drugs. She was sentenced to 6 years in jail, minus time served. She completed her sentence on March 29, 2017, and was released from Santa Cruz County Jail, although she did not taste freedom right away. Santa Cruz Sheriff's officials immediately turned her over to the custody of Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents that same morning. 9 days later, she was stripped of her U.S. citizenship and deported to Canada, where she also had citizenship. On June 22, 2018, Alix gave her first interview about her case, speaking with reporter Amy Larson of KSBW-TV. What was going through your mind? What were you thinking when Forrest Hayes lost consciousness on the boat that night? And you left without calling 911. Well, that was my second time meeting Forrest Hayes. And when I first got to the boat, he gave me Valium, and we sat down and didn't even have a full glass of wine and ate some food. And, at that point, he was very adamant about doing the drugs, despite what police say. We never had sex. He wasn't interested in that. He was more interested in partying. And the weekend before I was there, he was actually with a different girl on the boat, and he had asked her to procure methadone and heroin. She wasn't able to get the heroin, but she did get the methadone, and they did that together. And he passed out and texted her the next morning, wondering what had happened. I also did not know that hours before I got there, He had been drinking and been taking Valium. And though he seemed perfectly sober to me, if I had known both of those pieces of information that I know now, I would have never let him take the drugs. When he fell unconscious, I did try to revive him, to no avail. And I was very upset. I was crying and trying to wake him up, and the police said that I was coldly and calmly walking around the boat. And that's not the case at all. I was in a complete panic. And in that world, with seeking arrangement, discretion is the most important thing. And I did know that he was a married man. Well, it was not the correct choice. I was inebriated as I had been. I was on Valium. I had injected myself first. It looked to me like he was still breathing and just looked like he had passed out. I know that in the past I've done drugs and passed out and not woken up. So 24 hours later. And so I figured it was something like that, which was wishful thinking. And I just wanted to make it look like no one had been there, so that I didn't get him in trouble with his wife or the police or his workplace. And as I was driving home, I stopped the car multiple times, and I was just agonizing over calling 911. But ultimately, I didn't. And that's something that I regret every single day, is that I didn't call for help. If I had known that he was definitely overdosing and in immediate distress, then I would have called 911. But I wasn't in the right mind to assess that at the time. And something that a lot of people don't know is that I tried calling him multiple times in the days after that to see if he was okay. His phone was off. And so that's really when I guess I started getting worried. And yeah, I wish I could go back and change what happened, but I can't. And that's something that I have to live with, and something that his family has to live with it. So a lot of people are surprised when they hear that you were actually deported by ICE to Canada as soon as you were released from the Santa Cruz County Jail. And we've done a few interviews before this one. And you told me you're actually happier now living in Canada. Why is that? How come? Well, when I was deported initially, I was upset, primarily just because my immediate family lives in Georgia. But I feel safe up here from the police. Everything that happened, it seemed like the police had this hatred and anger towards me, though I'm not really too sure why. And I feel like if I had been allowed to stay in the States, I would have been driving one day and been pulled over randomly, and all of a sudden there would have been an ounce of heroin in my trunk that wasn't there before. And I just feel like if I had stayed in the States that, the police wouldn't have stopped trying to get those 15+ years in prison that they initially wanted. Though, I definitely feel a lot safer up here, and that I don't have to worry about them. Okay. During the interview, Alix voiced the suspicion that U.S. authorities had a vendetta against her and might find a way to pursue her. Just 3 days after her interview, her suspicion became a reality after the Fulton County District Attorney's Office made a surprising announcement. Well, we're talking about Alix Tichelman, who just went public for the first time with her story last Friday. Today, we learned she's been indicted on murder charges in connection to the death of a former boyfriend. Again, it involves heroin. Just days after the woman dubbed the Call Girl Killer gave her first exclusive interview to KSBW via Skype last week, prosecutors in Georgia have announced a grand jury has handed down 2 murder indictments against Alix Tichelman in the death of a former boyfriend. After Alix's arrest in 2014, California detectives learned about the supposed accidental death of her former boyfriend, Dean Riopel. In reviewing the coroner's report, they learned Riopel also died with heroin in his system, and that his cardiac arrest was drug-induced. Suspicious of another drug overdose-related death involving Alix, they contacted law enforcement in Milton, Georgia. The authorities there decided to reopen the investigation into Riopel's death. On June 25, 2018, a Georgia district attorney announced that a grand jury had returned an indictment of felony murder against Alix, as well as charges for providing the heroin which caused Riopel's death. 53-year-old Dean Riopel was the owner of an Atlanta club called Masquerade, as well as the lead singer of the shock rock band Impotent Sea Snakes. He was often called the Monkey Man because of the primates and other wild animals he kept on his 21-acre property. As of September 2013, he and Alix were in a relationship of 2.5 years and were considering the possibility of marriage. On September 6, 2013, Alix called police to accuse Riopel of domestic violence. When officers arrived, Riopel explained that Alix had become drunk and unruly at his club. She had been baring her breasts and stage diving. Told her to stop, but she threatened to accuse him of assault. A witness corroborated his story and added that Alix had bitten Riopel's finger, causing a tear. In the end, Alix was charged with battery and reporting a false crime. 11 days later, she called 911 again to report that she was taking a shower, and when she came out, she observed Riopel lying on the floor unconscious. For the second time in less than 2 weeks, police were called to Riopel's house. Alix explained to officers he had been on a bender the last few days, drinking heavily and taking oxycodone, before he fell to the ground. She then called for help. At the time, Riopel's death was investigated and considered an accidental heroin overdose. However, many folks have since come forward, including his former nanny, to say that Riopel was adamantly against the use of drugs. But authorities are reopening the investigation. Dean hated smoking. He hated drinking, and he most certainly hated drugs. I know he was a man that was, skeptical to even taking aspirin, let alone heroin. So do I believe that Dean injected himself with heroin? Absolutely not. The reinvestigation into Riopel's death resulted in a grand jury indictment of Alix on 4 separate counts, including 2 charges of felony murder. Yet despite authorities' stated intention to extradite Alix from Canada, face the charges, she remains free as of the date of this video. The status of the charges and any extradition request has not been made public. We have contacted the Fulton County DA's office and submitted a request through the Freedom of Information Act to determine the case status. When we receive a response, this channel will update you with details in the community section. However, even if the case were still active, prospect of extradition from Canada to the U.S. would be highly unlikely due to the complicated nature of extradition between the two countries. In this specific case, in the state of Georgia, felony murder conviction can potentially lead to the death penalty. Canada, having abolished the death penalty in 1998, is unlikely to extradite a Canadian citizen to a jurisdiction that might impose such a sentence. In the 2001 case of the United States v. Burns, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that individuals could not be extradited to face the death penalty in another country unless that country agreed not to seek the death penalty in that specific case. Thus, the decision to revoke Alix's American citizenship and deport her to Canada after completing her sentence in the Forrest Hayes case may have inadvertently shielded her from further prosecution related to the Dean Riopel case. Alix Tichelman, having served her sentence for her conviction in the death of Google executive Forrest Hayes, now leads a seemingly stable life. She works regular hours and claims to be drug-free and in a committed, loving relationship. Yet the specter of her past and the unresolved charges in the Dean Riopel case continue to cast shadows over her renewed existence. The narrative is tangled with ambiguity. In an article by NBC News dated July 20th, 2014, 6 people who knew Alix well were questioned. They all said the Alix they knew was a sensitive, big-hearted dreamer and a sweet girl who turned to sex, drugs, and professional provocation to cope with the pain of her upbringing. On the contrary, authorities in Georgia believe that Alix's involvement in providing heroin, leading to the deaths of both Hayes and Riopel, suggests a connected pattern of behavior rather than isolated incident. Is Alix the cold-hearted assassin as depicted by authorities and media? Or were the deaths of Hayes and Riopel merely accidental, consequence of high-risk activities and consensual drug use? With substantial barriers to extradition, quest for answers is fraught with uncertainty, and justice for the Riopel family remains elusive. Alix Tichelman's story, filled with contradictions and complexity, leaves us with more questions than answers. An unsettling epilogue to a tale that continues to intrigue and confound. Superior Court of Fulton County responded to our request for more information. They issued us an official disposition concerning the case of Alix Tichelman. As of September 30th, 2017, the case was placed on judicial hold, a legal status indicating a temporary suspension of criminal proceedings due to the defendant's unavailability for prosecution. This corroborates the previously suspected concern about extradition and the death penalty, given that the defendant currently resides in Canada. Interestingly, the Fulton County DA's office announced the new charges against Alix in June 2018, nearly 9 months after the hold was entered, just 3 days after Alix appeared on television. As Alix Tichelman attempts to rebuild her life far from the scenes of her darkest days, the unanswered questions surrounding the deaths of Forrest Hayes and Dean Riopel linger like a haunting specter. Her story is a reminder of how quickly lives can spiral out of control, leaving destruction in their wake. Whether Alix is guilty of more than just bad decisions or was simply a casualty of a dangerous lifestyle, the truth remains elusive. With the legal barriers to her extradition and the passage of time, it's possible that the full story may never be known. But one thing is certain: Alix Tichelman's story is a grim reflection on the hidden costs of indulgence and the complex nature of justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the dark and fascinating world of true crime. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Your insights help us dig even deeper. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, the truth is out there, waiting to be uncovered. This is World True Crime, signing off.